Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. Now, people should understand that I'm going to be expanding dramatically the other website, which is clayandIron.com. It's the Messianic Christian Ministry. It also deals with the above government technology, a lot of news around the world, and it'll be including a lot of the live stream TV channel kind of reports that'll be posted over there. There are some things over at Nutrimedical, which will be a lot more nutritional things, vignettes specifically on protocols that will be embedded in the wellness conditions. Today we have a kind of an interesting show, and I like to say this is like hanging Christmas decorations. We always hook them to a specific document. And one of those researchers that's done a tremendous amount of work on this and is super energized, I call her a super activist, is Deborah Tavares. What happens is when you go down in the Alice in Wonderland world, which we live in, and you change the rabbit hole, sometimes the rabbit hole takes you places that are more and more and more freaky rather than less and less and less. And the more you discover, the more you research, the more you realize every day you wake up just how ignorant you were the previous day or the previous part of your life. The thing that people should understand is that you'll never solve any problem unless you understand two things: the nature of what you are as a being and the nature of our universe, both good and evil. Jesus, when he had his vision and his encounter with Satan, who took him high to the top of the temple and told him to throw himself down, the angels will pick you up, and just worship before me, and I will give you all the kingdoms of the earth, because he had control of them right back from ancient Atlantis and before. There's probably been human beings relatively similar to us on Earth for 500,000 years. And civilization has obviously risen and fallen, just like that little tagline on Battlestar Galactica. The evidence is pretty solid. The chemical evidence, this is not religious, that there was in fact a nuclear war about 13,000 years ago, and that there have been continuous interaction with beings, which we in the Bible calls them, fallen ones, Nephilim, demons, whatever. But they're not just in your head like Flip Wilson. They're real. And what's going on is their secret agencies are the latest incarnation of the high priesthood of ancient Sumer, Egypt, and going back to Atlantis and before Mu, all the ancient high cults, and their secret sequestered scientific knowledge, which is probably 96% of the human collective knowledge, is sequestered among secret orders. And you don't get into Tier 1 science unless you're requested. You can be in Tier 2 science, which means a tenured professor in Britain or in Canada or elsewhere. You'll never get access to the Tier 1 science or Tier 1 corporations like Bechtel, General Dynamics, all kinds of corporations that are doing all kinds of off-world space projects, weird interactions with, if you want to call it, things that go bump in the night. We're not just talking about EVP or whatever, but we're talking about things like supercomputers with a plan to eventually kind of reduce the world population. This is published documents. And a really good researcher in this area is Deborah, because a lot of people think this is peripheral to why, for example, Obama opened up the southern border immigration. Why do we have documents where they're trying to form the Trans-Pacific Partnership with Asian countries? Why are they trying to make the Congress and the Senate vestigial when, in fact, it's been vestigial since the 1930s, when America was literally declared a state of national emergency and we're under martial law, which is why Obama is not ruling as a president of a republic and a democracy where there's representative rule. He's ruling under martial law and executive order, because there's a total abrogation of the idea of representative government and rule by law. That's the facts. As ugly as it seems, as nasty as it seems, if we don't face reality, we're going to constantly be surprised by the consequences of not understanding what I call the 0 and 1 of geopolitical spiritual reality. So, Deborah, let's start off with water wars, and I think that's a good way to start.
Absolutely, but Dr. Bill, I want to underscore the reality that we're all in, and my website is stopthecrime.net. That is stopthecrime.net.
Right.
We have posted a number of hot radio show topics. I would refer everyone to the top post today on the website. It is called Project Monarch for Mind Control. We're going to get into that a little bit, Dr. Bill, towards the end. Everyone needs to understand what is happening to all of us right now. But as we walk down that path of unbelievable sci-fi reality that we're in, I'm going to start out again kind of underscoring what you just said, Dr. Bill. We have been largely already mind-controlled and brainwashed in the sense that few of us, I certainly was not informed, that as of 1933 going forward, every year that the executive order is extended annually by every and each sitting president. The Constitution has been abolished. The rule of law has been abolished. And we fall under a national state of emergency.
Right.
And this is why we have unthinkable executive orders. And I would just encourage everyone, type in executive order, type in Federal Register. That's where these executive orders are posted. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that these executive orders do not serve us. We have a de facto corporate government that has been posing as a legitimate government, and we've let them get away with it because we want to think that we can vote and we can get these people out of office. Now, we've got many intelligent people that are running around supporting legislators, asking you to sign petitions. Petitions, polls, surveys are extremely dangerous because all of this information is tracked and monitored, and they're continuing to verify the readiness for when we are all ripe for the taking. In other words, how effective have all the chemicals in the air, water, and food supply been over many decades, along with the increased frequencies that we're experiencing from all of our wireless communication devices that are all weaponized frequencies, including cell towers, Gwen towers, antennas. Now they're using Wi-Fi in the school for our children. They're brainwashing our children in school. They're teaching them global warming is a fact. In fact, we have many frontline activists right now. If you ask them their opinion on global warming, many of them will tell you they're horrified. There are too many people using too much stuff. And I'm horrified to find out that there are many of those in the ranks that are trying to get the truth out. We know that science has been for sale, and it's been bought off by the highest bidder. It's been intentionally designed to bring in the policies of this corporate U.S. government. It's important to know that it was established, it's an established fact that the U.S. federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9th, 1933. And that all United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under the Emergency War Powers Act. So I can tell you right now, that's the first and biggest illusion and scam that you've got to get over, because as you hear what we're going to talk about today on the show, this builds from the fact we have no representation, and that must be pretty obvious, because why would
anybody
we
who
be
actually
having to
calculates
read
out what's
labels?
going. You also realize that the parties are sham.
Why would we be reading labels on our food to try to sidestep the poisons and toxins? Why are we fighting against having GMO in the food supply, fluoride in the water supply, and other additives that Siemens is adding to the water? Yes, check it out. And find out the levels of poisons that we as a country are enduring. And go to the Aquarius operations briefing at the top of the homepage of StopTheCrime.net. Understand all of these poisons are being put upon us for mass genocide. The Iron Mountain report even said that they would reduce the population on an annual basis, so that incrementally and gradually we would just not notice how many people are already dead. But I can also tell you the census numbers are all skewed. We do not have the population that we're being told we do. Under all of the Agenda 21 programs that many people have heard about, it's important to understand Agenda 21 policies are coming right in at us from the White House. All executive orders. Here's just a couple of executive orders that you need to know about. Many of you probably do. But I'm just going to read a couple. Executive Order 10999 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. Well, check those off. They've been done. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national
Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And let's continue. We're talking about the Postmaster General and a few other issues regarding executive orders. Deborah, please continue.
Yes, that's right. Okay, I'm just quickly going over a few executive orders so that everyone is very clear that everything is happening now through the executive branch via executive orders. These are all corporate rules.
There's a few new ones that Obama's done. They're so shocking. I mean, each one of them is enough should be impeaching him.
Yeah,
but you don't see the Republicans doing anything.
There's no need to worry about impeachment because we're set up under a corporate structure. And so
right.
Who's there is just simply a shadow anyway. But let's look at Executive Order 11004. This allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. This is the Wildlands Project. This is what many of you have heard encompassed in UN Agenda 21, and literally redirecting the populations into these urban growth boundaries. Now, for any of you that have not heard the YouTube video that we put up as an emergency town hall meeting, I cannot recommend more highly that you listen to this. It's entitled, Who's Running America? You can just type that in, Who's Running America? Because we're down to a local, state, and of course federal level. We don't have any government. They're not real. Government is not real. There are corporations calling themselves government. That is one of the fundamental illusions that most people are living under, sadly. And I love Mark Twain's quote, Dr. Bill, that says it's easier to fool people than to convince people they have been fooled. So I'm going to get into this water wars because here in Northern California where we are, and of course we know in California in general, we have had this engineered drought. And actually the legislature in California has hired NASA, NOAA, and the Scripps Institute to help them with land subsidence readings. In other words, where rural country farms have too many wells and are causing sinkage in the land. This is a way they're going to identify and tell people they can no longer use their wells. This is a way in which to steal the land from the farmers, because when you look at the policies that are largely in place already that require everybody to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, that's based upon fraudulent science, the idea that we need to reduce our CO2 levels because there's too many people using too much stuff, all fraudulent science. And these policies are built up on lies of fossil fuels, and fossil fuels are a renewable. You can go to stopthecrime.net, and you can go to the Climate Action Plan link and listen to what Colonel Fletcher Prouty said about fossil fuels and how Rockefeller designed the idea that they were finite and that we were running short. They'd close down wells and create the illusion to keep the cost up. So fossil fuels are a renewable. But I wanted to go into the water situation here in California and everywhere else. This is a global assault. This is a press release out of Davos, Switzerland, dated January 26th of 2012. And it says the water industry will privately review its newest strategy for driving public water resources into private hands at the World Economic Forum. You can type that in, World Economic Forum, and you'll see a document. A partnership was quietly launched in October of 2011 with the funding, now pay attention to this, with the funding of the World Bank, Coca-Cola, and Veolia. That is Rothschild. And they will report on progress towards its stated mission to transform the water sector by establishing a new normative approaches to water governance. Quote, that will put the private sector into the driver's seat in water management. And they go on to conclude that they're calling themselves the Water Resources Group, WRG, and they're headed by Nestle. Nestle is behind the water grab as well as Bechtel and the Rand Corporation.
Right.
And they're targeting communities, they tell us, Mexico, Jordan, India, South Africa, to shape and test their global government programs to take over the water supply, to privatize it, and make it more feasible and for profit. This is all about taking and closing off water access to all of us. Now, all of you can type in Bechtel, B-E-C-H-T-E-L, in your search engine and type in Bolivia. And you will see how Bechtel launched a water war and water grab in Bolivia. And they were literally welding wells closed in some of the rural indigenous areas, and the people, the farmers, were accessing the wells even though they'd been closed, and they posted UN troops so that the people could not access water. It forced them off their land into the city, and ultimately it resulted in massive water wars on the streets in Bolivia. We're not told about any of this. Bechtel is involved in the water grab here in Northern California along with the RAND Corporation, R-A-N-D. Very important to understand, the RAND Corporation is the Tavistock of the United States. This is for mind control, and this is for orchestrating how meetings are conducted. Now, how did all of this happen with manipulated meetings and doublespeak? Well, they've used doublespeak. They say non-lethal, but of course deadly. And the RAND Corporation created the Delphi technique. As many of you go to city council meetings, county board of supervisors, or school meetings, you'll find that you get maybe a couple of minutes to speak because everything is incorporated. That is the most important thing to understand. When we go there with documents and we try to tell are what we believe to be elected officials, but they are not. The minute they take their oath of office, it's not an oath on the Constitution. It's an oath to the corporate structure. That is how everything is run. And it's run on grants and contracts. In fact, in the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document, it says the bookkeeper can remain king as long as they can keep the people from understanding how the bookkeeping is orchestrated.
Yeah.
So right now, it's critical. We're all being assaulted in our cities right now with policies that have, in large part, already been adopted because it was by executive order that you all reduce your carbon footprint and your greenhouse gas emissions. So you are going to find increased assaults upon you because the cities are increasing revenue so people cannot afford to live in their homes. Here's an example. In Southern California, at the end of 2013, people were informed that they would have to pay an annual fee to have their code enforcement drive by all non-owner occupied homes to see that the grass was cut and that there were no derelict cars in the driveway. I can hear the music coming up, Dr.
Yeah,
Bill.
you can hear
that story on the other side.
What we want to do is we wanted to connect some dots for people. So now we have the documents, we have the statements by the globalists, and now we're going to connect a few dots. Back and, we want to use a little bit of humor here, too, because this is pretty dark at times. And to be honest with you, we have, as believers, we can have a joy in being a believer because we're literally living in the closest thing we can call hell, which is the place of the lake of fire, i.e. the universe, the cosmos. If you go inside the little magnetosphere of Earth, you literally get fried with cosmic and zeta particles and background cosmic radiation. Your DNA gets stripped apart in a matter of minutes to hours to days to weeks. In fact, it's known that the astronauts that traveled to the moon, they lost 1 IQ point per day in space because none of these space vehicles had cosmic, shielding against cosmic rays and gamma rays and zeta particles, etc. In fact, at the back of the retina of the eyes, I remember some of the astronauts would say they were seeing flashes because as the photons would hit the back of your eye. They also, by the way, see objects outside because, the fact is we're not alone in the universe. And for those people who think that Dr. Deagle's getting into the woo-woo area, I had Q-level security clearance, and having had that and having been exposed firsthand, not secondhand, to some very nasty and very crazy stuff, I can tell you that there's a lot more to the universe, and I only will even venture to tell you less than 10%, not even 10% of what I know, because you'd think that, well, we won't listen to anything else he says, whether it's dealing with liver detoxification or anti-aging, even if it's science-based and you can read the articles yourself, because you'll think that I'm nuts. But the fact is, unless you connect the dots and realize we're dealing with a malevolent evil that exceeds the human race, unless you understand that these things are non-human, unless you understand that they are very ancient, even the techniques they used to split the mind, like Kathy O'Brien with Reichian mind control that goes back to the ancient Sumer, Egyptian, and Atlantean empires that go back 13,000 to 35,000 years ago. Unless you understand these things, you really aren't going to get clued in. And if you don't understand also that our universities are Tier 2 science, not Tier 1, that they don't want to tell you that corporations have developed nuclear fusion technologies for 60 years now, they don't want you to know that most of the environmental issues that are being put forward have been hijacked by global bankers. There is no such thing as a peak CO2, but there is a problem with peak oxygen, because the oxygen-carbon cycle is limited. And yes, you can put more CO2 in the oceans and the land will respond if you don't poison them. But when you've got 10,000 to 20,000 dead zones and you're expanding them dramatically with toxic pollutants and nerve gas and destroying the upper layer of the ozone layer by putting nanoparticles at 80,000 feet to supposedly create a weapon shield against incoming nuclear weapons, and it kills the mentor mycorrhizia lichens that destroy the trees, and then you destroy the benthic layer of the upper oceans, and I'm an oceanographer, by putting toxic heavy metals there. What the heck do you expect when the oxygen capacity of the Earth to convert CO2 to oxygen is dramatically reduced? It's like giving the world chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So we're dealing with a terminal society, a terminal civilization, and it's my analysis based on many scientists that we have less than, without a nuclear war, without a global cataclysm, without martial law, we got 20 years. Max 20 years.
Well, Dr. Bill,
if things turn south, and they could turn south very quickly, if we have a coronal mass ejection, if we have a sort of an even biological weapons war, EMP, etc., created by Iran or anybody else as we start to nuke them, we have less than 10 years. So we're dealing with a civilization where the global maniacs, the Satanists, and that's what they are. The best way to describe them as Satanists, because most people that are Christians are going to kind of get this. Most people that are logical, that are willing to kind of use their imagination to realize you're not in Wonderland anymore. I mean, we're in the black forest with Hansel and Gretel, leaving crumbs to find our way back to Grandma's house.
Well, that's exactly right, Dr. Bill, and I need to bring up an extremely important topic.
Go ahead now, because I wanted to do that promo to get people onto the right wavelengths, to realize we're going to take you down the rabbit trail a little bit today. Not too far, so we'll scare the hell out of you. But you need to realize the reason why your representative isn't doing their job is because they're not representing you. The reason why they're water wars, they want to steal the water, and why they're geoengineering to block the radiation from northern Pacific Ocean from Fukushima, although they're not fixing the Fukushima. I've got a book that will be coming out probably within a week that will actually explain technically how they could fix it, but they don't want to. Now, if I can come up with a document that says that with nuclear engineers as to how we could fix it, and they won't, it's because they have an intention to harm you, to destroy your biology, to sterilize you, and have you die prematurely. Period.
Well, that's absolutely right. And to that end, Dr. Bill, we've got to talk, and I really want to bring forward
go ahead.
The targeted individuals and the gang stalking units that are now in all of our neighborhoods across the country. This is absolutely imperative for people to understand. War has been declared within the United States. Their use of toxic chemicals in the food, water, and air, and also now the electronic weapons that are literally hunting down people and many people throughout the country. So I'm going to read a letter, part of a letter, and you can go to stopthecrime.net, hit the quick links on the homepage, go to Hot Radio Show Topics, and you can read this letter in its entirety for yourself.
Who's the letter from, by the way, and what's their qualification?
Yeah, I'm going to get into that right now, Dr. Bill. It is by Representative Jim Guest out of Missouri. It's dated October of 2007. It is to his colleagues in the legislature, and he says, "This letter is to ask for your help for the many constituents in our country who are being affected unjustly by electronic weapons of torture and covert harassment groups. Serious privacy rights and violations and physical injuries have been caused by the activities of these groups and their use of so-called non-lethal weapons on men, women, and even children." And he goes on to talk about how people have been chipped. They have been unwittingly chipped. He talks about that with the new revelation of cancer risks besides the privacy of human rights problems, and with the chips and RF signals, He's asking for help in stopping these abuses and aiding those already affected. Now, Jim Guest formerly was a NASA scientist. Now I'm going to read just a little clip out of another letter that was submitted as congressional record by Senator John Glenn, dated January 22nd of 2007. John Glenn said that he rises today to introduce the Human Research Subject Protection Act of 1997. This is only in part. He said, if I approached any one of you, any of the other senators, and I asked you, did you know it, but the last time you or your family went to the doctor or went to the hospital, your wife or your husband or your daughter or your son became the subject of a medical experiment, and that they were not even told about it, that they were given medicine and they were given pills and they were given radiation. They were given something, and they were not even told about it. Well, his letter is in its entirety, again, on stopthecrime.net. Quick links, go to Hot Radio Show Topics. Now, I want also for all of you to do a little bit of additional research. You can type in wires in the brain. That's wires in the brain in YouTube. And Rodolfo Linus was a Nazi scientist that was brought over into the U.S. from Bogota, Colombia, to New York University. And he studied and perfected the interfacing in our brains with the U.S. de facto government, with NSA and the CIA, and literally they can now use two-way radio transmitters to create a human that is literally operated remotely. And this is what we're seeing. We also know that the chemtrails are for nano-brain entrainment and many other aspects as well. But I've just posted on the homepage of StopTheCrime.net, on the homepage, Project Monarch. Very, very important to understand the levels of mind control. Why this has all happened is we have all been brainwashed to various degrees in our indoctrination camps called schools. And it's important to know, none of us knows, most people don't know, again, that we have a de facto corporate system that is creating rules that are corporate rules that we never voted for, a.k.a. The executive orders. But this document is a very painful document. It is a 12-page document with one page of footnotes. I can only tell you that if you have ever been targeted and if you've ever been a victim of MK Ultra, it's advised at the very top not to read this document. So I'm going to put that out right now. If any of you know of a victim that is receiving voice-to-skull technology, which is synthetic telepathy, complements of our de facto corporate government that is experimenting on the global population.
Okay, open up the next can of worms, please. Welcome back, and Deborah, so let's proceed to the next issue.
Individuals, because everyone listening needs to do some research of their own on this. We're not going to see soldiers, men and women, coming off of the battlefields with explosive injuries from bombs and bullets. We're going to see now on the battlefield called Earth and in America now all around us, people coming off these battlefields or not able to get off the battlefield that are being hit with remote, invisible electromagnetic pulsed frequencies.
Yeah, but there's layers of it. There's the targeted individual and there's the targeted general populations now. Now we've got smart meters.
Exactly right.
So, for example, you can broadband over power lines frequencies that make people agitated or depressed. You can put frequencies over the power lines that literally stops people from what's called oppositional behavior. So you don't push back against what I call obscene actions by the government.
I want to add another layer to the poisoning of us so that people are aware what they can do to avoid some of these issues. Because the idea is not to push people into feeling that it's all over and to take no action.
Right.
Your lack of engaging in what we're talking about is your consent. And plain and simple, And the reason we're having a show and a program like we're having today is, by and large, people have consented. But having that been said, I think it's just really, really important for people to understand what is happening in the targeted individuals' world. They are being hit with frequencies. They're being gang-stalked with groups that literally, and this may sound insane because it is, but they're targeting these people with synthetic telepathy, which is voice to skull, where they can pump voices into someone's head. And we know now that this is increasing in our stores. Walmart has a subliminal messaging protocol. Some of the major drugstores have been doing this, where during Halloween they can pump ghoulish sounds that only the children hear. Recently that was discovered, where the parents were at a checkout and the children were horrified. And they were talking about all these horrible sounds they were hearing. And the checkout person said, "Oh, we've got this low-pitched acoustic situation going on that only is heard by children. This is an acoustic weapon. And this keeps children fearful. They have nightmares at night. Everything that is occurring to us is to create fear, mass fear, so that we do not respond." Now, what we've talked about, Dr. Bill, and there's just so much to cover, but I want everybody to pay attention to that latest post on the homepage of Stop the Crime entitled Project Monarch. There is a general history of mind control. There is the evolution of mind control. It is horrific. I can tell you this is not meant for everyone to read. Definition and descriptions, alters and triggers, bloodlines, and the level of the programs. It even discusses what they do out at Bohemian Grove. And as you know, Dr. Bill, we have protested against Bohemian Grove for the last...
Where the body parts flow down the Russian River, and people know that there's human sacrifice, sex magic rituals, and bizarre behaviors before the Owl Moloch, which is an ancient pagan ceremony. And people they don't really grasp this as real. They think that it's kind of a play act where people are just acting like children as adults, but they're not. They're literally playing out interactions with what we call demigods, which are visitors from other worlds that are very evil, that go back to the very ancient world, that have been genetically messing with humanity for a long time. Says they shall mingle themselves in Daniel with the seed of men. And so we have an overclass of people that are what we call the demon seed, that are not just physical genetically, but spiritually. They're created through Reichian mind control, where they split them. Like, for example, Mr. Obama. It's obvious that Mr. Obama is, and no leader, including Hillary Clinton, who's now going to be the lead candidate for the Democrats, moves forward unless the so-called power elite have a DID, or a dissociative identity disorder split person, that can be made as a Manchurian candidate, can have a photographic memory, can literally be a wind-up actor in order to act out the position of power.
That's exactly what we're witnessing now at all levels, most levels of government globally.
Right.
In fact, I would recommend everyone type in your search engine, "Madness in the Fast Lane." Madness in the Fast Lane, and watch that YouTube video. We're literally now being transformed into superhumans. That's what all the special operation different levels of special ops, the black ops, the Navy SEALs, they're literally being enhanced. And we've got another document on stopthecrime.net about human performance. It is by the Jason brain scientist and the Mitri Corporation. Very important to understand the level of the entanglement that has been usurped into the United States at all levels, in all institutions of learning. We're talking about the education, all the universities, etc. What I would recommend at this point is for people to understand that it is possible to create slightly safer communities as this continues to amp up by creating awareness. People just need to understand that mind control is going to be increased massively. We're going to see many more car accidents. We're going to see many people individually being queued up and sent out into higher population zones. and used as assassins, which is just what you said, Dr. Bill, about Manchurian candidates. This is what is being done, and a perfect movie to watch is for predictive programming was The Island of Dr. Moreau. I would strongly urge everyone to revisit that, as well as Soylent Green, because all of this is occurring. This is our reality. This is what has been happening. While we all believe that we're living in a normal world, we're living in the opportunity to understand reality. And on the other side of wrapping your brain around some of these unbelievable realities is the feeling and sense of empowerment. I know that many people do get overwhelmed. Many people literally have various symptoms of PTSD as they hear about some of these things.
But they don't need to have a chip implanted. I'd just give you this little vignette as we close off this hour, but we'll have you back. In 1999, when I traveled to 42 cities in Israel, I had to tell people that were listening to the Prophecy Club radio show and my visit to 42 cities where we had conferences and Israel to stop bringing their manila envelopes with their CT scans of their implant chips, or the actual fleshly implant chip with the flesh in test tubes or specimen containers, because it, as I say, it's irrelevant. And the reason why I say it's irrelevant is this. It's irrelevant because they don't need chips anymore. I'm very aware of the Tavistock Institute in Britain, the Menninger Institute in Topeka, Kansas, the John Hopkins Research Institutes at the University of California, at various places like UC Irvine, etc., UCLA, where they're doing research on what's called the Rambo chip, which, by the way, this goes back to the 1960s. And then they later realized with Dr. Delgado and your other scientist you mentioned, that they didn't need that. They were using what's called brain entrainment. That's where the medication, I call it the drug, aspartame, came in, because they found both sound, light, and electromagnetic entrainment of body tissue, especially brain tissue, to external pulsed information. And it becomes a conditioned response amplifier. So that basically, whether it's a high-definition television picture or an image or an idea, you can set up a conditioning paradigm because you get entrainment of their brain tissue because they're taking aspartame or Splenda, which is a chlorinated optical isomer of sugar. It has no carbohydrate effect, but it causes entrainment, especially aspartame, MSG, and MSG-like molecules, like textured vegetable protein and 29 plus other names. What people should understand is that when this gentleman brought this chip, of course, it was otherworldly. They have to understand, this gentleman, for example, that brought this into me, he was actually a welder working in Needles, California for General Dynamics Corporation doing some welding. And he went in for an orthopedic procedure on his knee and came out of the post-op with a nosebleed because he started having weird dreams, visions, other things happening, and hearing sounds. He thought, this is nuts. So I went to a neurologist. Neurologist did a CT scan and found this chip sitting in the base of his brain through the cribriform plate, put in through the roof of his nose. He got it surgically removed by a neurosurgeon.
Everyone that's listening,
it's all real. He had a thing surgically removed, and I can tell you umpteen stories. And please don't start sending these chips, or it's irrelevant. The fact is, we're in a war. They don't even need chips anymore. They can send it broadband over power lines. They can put it over smart meter, broadcast networks. They can hit you with cell phones. One of my contacts at NSA, because I had lots of contacts, he said, we used to double tap people in the forehead and the left ventricle, but we don't do that. And this is as of like the 1970s. We hit them with a directed energy weapon. So, the reality of the world is we're living in the Matrix. Sorry, that's what's the facts. And there's ways of getting out of it, but you have to be aware of it first.